Good morning, everyone. First, just a brief introduction of myself. I'm the current Vice President of ISACA Singapore chapter, and I've worked in the cybersecurity field for the last 23 years in various responsibilities. From developing cybersecurity standards to risk assessment to incident management and awareness training, and developing multi-year master plans and running security improvement programs in both IT and OT environments. For the next 30 minutes or so, my intent is to address some of what I believe are critical cybersecurity controls to be deployed in a DevOps environment, and also share conundrums that are commonly encountered. Last but not least, I hope to end with a bit of look ahead into what we can expect from DevOps. I would love to hear your thoughts as well. Just before I begin, I just want to highlight the disclaimer you can see at the bottom of my slide, that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are entirely my own and do not necessarily reflect the official position of any organization. In this COVID-19 and for some post-COVID-19 era, we are definitely looking at a new cybersecurity normal, where employees work from home and students have home-based learning. The cyber footprint has changed, and there is a surge in cloud adoption. There is also a multi-fold increase in cyber attacks and threats, whether it is towards virtual private networks or home broadband routers or end devices or the cloud itself, in order to capitalize on the increased attack surface and use them as conduits into the corporate enterprise networks. The old adage that it is not a matter of if, but when incidents would happen is passé. The new adage is that either you know you are breached or you don't, in an assumed breach principle. How then can we prepare ourselves against the inevitability of a breach? In the DevOps environment, how can we implement security in the manner to better future-proof against such cyber attacks? First, I think it is important that we recognize our backyard in DevOps. We all know the tightly intertwined relationship between DevOps and cloud. The benefits, without doubt, for DevOps is high-velocity deployment, product improvements, and increased trust between development and operation teams. Cloud adoption into DevOps provide a black box approach. The complexity of managing resources can be outsourced to the cloud service provider. With auto-provisioning and deprovisioning, granted the elasticity of the cloud, greater focus can be placed upon development work. Most of such development is through an infrastructure as a service model or platform as a service model. In most cases, virtual private cloud and public cloud is adopted more than pure private clouds. In DevOps, we often use the phrase infrastructure as code. Configuration of servers can be run as code and deployed. They can be versioned, SVN'd, and tested. Such deployment allows consistency, resulting in configuration assurance. When there are updates, such updated configurations would be applied consistently across. Such an approach also eliminates the issue of code that works fine in staging, but failing in production, simply because the operating environment is not truly alike between staging and production. Such approaches are otherwise known as CI/CD, or continuous integration and continuous deployment. There are many tools in this area, such as Jenkins and Docker. Configuration management is an indispensable aspect of DevOps. Chef, Puppet, SaltStack, Ansible, Terraform are examples of such tools. Not least, underlying containerization and microservices rely on solutions such as Kubernetes. After recognizing and understanding our DevOps backyard, we now explore the key security concerns with it so that we can address them. On this slide is a list of some of what I feel are the key concerns with our DevOps backyard. Have any of you come across this piece of news recently regarding the Docker Hub distributing crypto mining malware. Firstly, automated deployment does not come without risk. Automation has its downsides and is a means to repeat human errors with rigor in a consistent manner. Cloud reduces control and visibility at hardware and network. In one instance, an administrator machine compromised by malware resulted in a breach of the systems. We have also heard of ransomware or ransomware plaguing cloud service providers of late. While automation helps ensure consistency, sometimes faulty spin-ups may leave a virtual machine in an unstable state, which you may not realize until everything is automated in a black box. Since developer duties are integrated with operator duties, there is now a seeming lack of segregation of duties between the developers and the operators. The other concern is whether we realize that developers have adhered to secure development standards, or they are actually cutting corners to roll out fast due to speed to market. In addition, unlike the images of an on-premise server, there may be multiple versions of images kept with varying security. There's a risk of spinning up one that is with the inappropriate security posture, say for a critical application. Not least, do you know how quickly are patches deployed when the security flaw is found in the cloud image? How do you keep track? When Meltdown and Spectre vulnerabilities struck, many of the cloud service providers scrambled to fix it because such vulnerabilities could result in a gas escape into the hypervisor, therefore allowing one tenant to potentially access another tenant's data in the multi-tenanted environment. Was it visible to you how rapidly the cloud service provider had resolved these vulnerabilities? In the previous slide, I had provided you a list of potential cybersecurity related issues with the DevOps environment. How then can we future-proof against cyber attacks and threats? Mindset is of foremost importance. We often hear the phrase, follow the spirit and not the form. All too often, employees who do not believe would look at the form and work around the spirit of the intent so as to fit the form. This often results in cybersecurity practices that satisfy compliance requirements and audits, but do not actually address the risk where it matters most. Therefore, ahead of everything else, having the right cybersecurity and risk-based culture is of utmost importance. Bringing DevSecOps into focus, the premise is that everyone in the software development lifecycle is responsible for security. It is not the cybersecurity team alone. It is not the infrastructure team alone. Finger pointing hinders security. Where the roles or RACI is unclear in the area of cybersecurity, cracks will form, allowing intruders to exploit them. This is also about trying to automate core security tasks by embedding security controls and processes into the DevOps workflow. To shift left in the DevOps toolchain, build everything with a security by design and privacy by design mindset. There are three important C's in the DevSecOps culture that should be ingrained and repounded upon, and that is collaboration, communication, and cohesiveness. This would minimize finger pointing and having no man's land in responsibilities. One of the most time-consuming tasks in any project is addressing the RACI and confirming responsibilities. DevOps can only be agile when these three C's are present. After setting up the correct mindset, good governance underscores the ability to future-proof against cyber threats. It embodies 6 key phases. First and foremost, it is important to adopt a good IT risk management framework. Next, perform threat modeling. Third, adopt key security axioms or principles. Fourth, adopt a good cybersecurity framework. And combining these earlier phases allows you to determine more prescriptively security control objectives in the context of your business and environment, as well as determine the system, technology, and solution architectures. Good governance entails doing the right things and doing the things right. The left part of the equation entails doing the right things, and the right part on doing the things right. The first phase of good governance is to adopt a robust IT risk management framework. How do you know how much risk to tolerate and how much risk to mitigate, and down to what acceptable level? It is not about enabling security. It is all about enabling the business. There needs to be a strong alignment of business, operations, and IT. Everyone must have the same goalpost in sight to synchronize resources and efforts. In my dictionary, it is never about minimizing risk, simply for the fact that there can never be 100% security. And therefore, any goalpost of minimizing risk ends up to be in a bottomless pit to sink in resources and efforts with no goal in sight. It is actually really about optimizing risk. We do not want to overdo cybersecurity. As a business, it needs to take calculated risk, which equates to optimizing risk to just the right level of tolerance and acceptance. I shared earlier about mindset and the 3 C's. The RACI has to be clear in terms of who is accountable for risk. Ultimately, he or she who holds the purse strings and can decide how much to spend is the risk owner. After all, he is accountable for the success of a system or project and determines the acceptable risk level and how much to spend on mitigating cyber risk to optimal levels. Just now I have shown you the IT risk framework. That's the first phase. So now, other than cyber risk, there is also the business risk of adoption versus the non-adoption of DevOps. I have shared some of the risks of adoption earlier about the cyber issues and threats. But what do you think are the risks of non-adoption? There is the likelihood of losing out on having a competitive advantage, being less versatile and agile. The opportunity cost for the practitioner is higher. There are more overheads with slower testing and deployments. And with that, it may result in shadow adoption of undesired DevOps practices that have not undergone the rigor of a security by design deployment. Just think about the recent cases of deployment of Docker images with crypto mining backdoors. The next phase is about performing threat modeling. We need to understand our enemies. In the cybersecurity realm, MITRE ATT&CK framework is widely adopted as one of primary means to model threats. Every advanced persistent threat group and campaign has a modus operandi, and it falls under the 7 tactics of the CyberQ chain, and hundreds of techniques and sub-techniques under each tactic within the attack framework. By understanding how adversarial tactics and techniques work, it helps us to determine whether there are gaps in our defenses and how to better address them. As Sun Tzu aptly puts it across, know our enemies and know ourselves, and we will win all 100 battles. What are the attacks on the cloud platform as a service or infrastructure as a service? Has your cloud service provider deployed solutions to address them? Are your backups in place to restore images? Should they be encrypted by ransomware, for instance? The third phase is about adopting key security principles and fundamentals. In DevOps terms, it is about deploying security as code. It means that security should be embedded not just in the design, but as default and during deployment, supported by communications. What all these translates to in terms of actionable items are the corresponding items to the right of the arrows. I just want to quickly highlight 2 key areas. First being continuous audit and monitoring. Security is a continuous process. A lot of cloud deployments fall apart to hackers because the security posture was not continually maintained. The initial setup is never the be-all and end-all. The second area being the extension to supply chain. Your suppliers upstream and customers downstream can greatly impact the security of your systems due to the trust relationship established. Therefore, the results of any security posturing tools should be extended to them if possible. In an organization I worked in, I extended phishing simulation exercises to my customers as a value-added service to them. And I know very clearly that if they get breached, we are also affected. In addition, time and again, we hear this being mentioned. Privacy by design is growingly important and should be integrated with security by design. how are you protecting potentially sensitive PII information in the cloud? In the fourth phase of doing the right things, we need to adopt an industry-recognized cybersecurity framework. Just choose one. COBIT from ISACA is widely adopted in some cities, and especially by financial institutions. This governance framework is an amalgamation of various governance frameworks and standards as well. It has a mapping against various ISO standards and NIST cybersecurity framework as well. Remember earlier on I shared that in this era of increased cyber attacks in the new normal, we need to adopt and assume breach thinking. With this thinking, emphasis needs to be placed on the NIST CSF's detect, respond, and recover pillars, so that the cyber kill chain can be disrupted early to contain and minimize impact to the business. ISACA research has shown that enterprises that use CMMI or COBIT-5 can align their DevOps approach to gain value and apply adaptive approaches to address challenges. By adapting robust governance and maturity practices from this framework, while maintaining a flexible approach to interpreting requirements, enterprises can realize the benefits of DevOps while at the same time achieve higher order of maturity. Beyond standards frameworks, there are also guidelines you can refer to, provide more guidance in the correct things to do. For instance, Association of Banks of Singapore had provided a few guidelines such as OSPA or Outsourced Service Provider Assessment. Such assessments can be used for assessing cloud service providers, besides the Cloud Service Alliance's Cloud Control Matrix guidelines. On the topic of cloud security, which is integral to DevOps adoption, here are some of the key cloud security considerations for both pre-deployment as well as during deployment. Remember the key principles of security by design and security in deployment. One of the key concerns in this list is incident management process and drills, as well as forensics process during a breach. Perform your tabletop exercises and incident drills involving your cloud service providers, such as in the identification, containment, and eradication phases. Right? Do all stakeholders know the RACI of who does what? As for forensics process, recall the cloud deployment allows for elastic auto-provisioning and deprovisioning. What do you think happens when a breached image gets deprovisioned into the common pool? Can you still make a forensics image out of it, especially if it has already been reprovisioned for other use? Such considerations have to be discussed with your cloud service provider so the image is kept at least for a reasonable period of time so that the forensics image can still be performed. Utmost is the need to assess the asset criticality and sensitivity. You can only protect what you know. For each of the controls you see on the right, the RACI must be clear. If it is put up generally as everyone's responsibility, we know very well it ends up being nobody's responsibility. Eventually, the process of having the architecture security reviewed by the Architecture Review Board with the right approvals must be in place. In my view, in the relocation to the cloud, the security posture off-premise in the public or virtual private cloud should not be worse off than on-premise. Otherwise, the increased risk delta has to be deemed acceptable by the risk owner. For instance, due to business direction and objective. Earlier slide shows the pre-deployment controls. This slide shows briefly some of the key controls as part of the security in deployment. Of utmost importance is change management controls and regular checkpoint meetings. I shared earlier, cloud posture deteriorates if it is not maintained. Regular meetings and stock taking helps to maintain that posture. I shared earlier that one of the issues is with security patch levels. It is important to note that good vulnerability management does not entail blindly patching all the time. Patching is just a means to an end, which is to have a vulnerability resolved. There are many ways to fix vulnerabilities, from disabling unnecessary services to establishing virtual patching, etc. In addition, a proper vulnerability remediation timeline is important. All too often, I see that this requirement is often left out in the discussion with the cloud service provider. Is the cloud service provider's vulnerability resolution timeline in adherence with your corporate timeline? Such vulnerability remediation timeline must be risk-based so as to determine whether there is an exploit in the wild, and also differentiation during peacetime versus the state of heightened monitoring. where risk is elevated and remediation needs to be more timely as a result. In the assumed breach thought process, incident management is of key focus. Therefore, we should consider elevating the maturity of incident management process and work towards a predictive maturity stage. Some of the key areas of consideration entail the detect, respond, and recover stages of the NIST cybersecurity framework. First, do you have a baseline of your system to allow any unauthorized changes to your system to be easily identified? Next, do you consider black swan events in your incident playbooks, such as massive ransomware or ransomware outbreak, across all your infrastructure or platforms in the cloud? Have you also considered business continuity in the cloud? Would you consider a multi-cloud infrastructure? When a massive outbreak affects your organization, what do you recover first and in what order? If email is down, what alternative communications would you consider, etc., etc.? I know for a fact that a number of cloud service providers whom I knew got breached had quickly established an active cyber defense strategy. This is again based on assumed breach mentality. An active cyber defense strategy entails the ingestion of threat intelligence, network security monitoring, incident response, and finally threat and environment manipulation. This also follows what is known as the UDA model on the right, to actively perform threat hunting of threats. Are the events in your cloud monitored by SIEM and SOAR for threat hunting and correlation? The last phase in doing the things right entails going through the phases of architecting and designing a solution architecture that's risk optimized with residual risk translated into business speak to be approved by the risk owner. The security catalog has to be accordingly developed for standardization and consistency in the DevOps deployment. Next, I go into more on DevOps, baking security in DevOps. My next few slides are oriented on examples of applying the earlier mentioned governance framework onto baking security into DevOps and identifying how some things can be done right. CI with automation allows better integration of security tools and secure code review tools such as Sonatype Nexus Vulnerability Scanner should definitely be deployed. Configuration management, such as using SCUP or Security Control Automation Protocol, should be adopted and include the aspects of logging, alerting, and security metrics. As containers allow isolation of application, there are also tools available to scan Docker images for their posture, and such tools should be adopted. CIS should be used for benchmarking, and their tools can be utilized to scan Docker images as well. In addition, cloud service provider portals and integrated APIs also assist in providing independent verification of automated inventory and should be utilized. Asset tracking and vulnerability scanning tools such as Qualys should be used. Not least, process should be established to ensure that any updates to the infrastructure, such as code security configuration triggers, and automated application scan or SCUP check. In the DevOps toolchain, what we have been advocating is a shift-left approach to ensure that code is deployed securely in a security in deployment approach, which entails the above two circles. In addition to the above, I just want to point out that it is also important to consider what is on the right of the queue chain, which is the continual monitoring and incident management processes. In the rush to speed to market, these are often left out. Again, I want to stress the importance of ensuring security event triggers are built into the code to allow proper baselining and breaches to be more readily identified. Now, let me discuss a bit on security remediation deployment strategies. There are essentially two types of strategy. One is A/B testing, which entails having scans integrated as part of deployment to provide immediate verification in a gradual rollout approach. A variant of this approach, which is deemed less disruptive, is to roll out newly patched or security remediated image files in new VMs by scaling the system up and then removing the older unremediated or unpatched systems when scaling down. This process is more seamless and less painful. Lastly, I would like to address one of the issues I highlighted earlier on, including segregation of duties. The trouble is that it is not always guaranteed that the development, operations, or QA personnel will be focused on ensuring security compliance due to maximizing business flexibility and speed to market. And often, because static and dynamic code testing requires application code to be extended to operate, the way they are deployed needs to be modified to fit a DevOps approach. Because DevOps meant fully automated runway to production, how results are captured and the way they feedback correctly into the development processes need to be properly established. Separation of duties or segregation of duties can still be ensured, for instance, by severely restricting developer access with detailed change control logs created and tied to every change, so that every adjustment is auditable. A detection approach instead of a prevention approach is emphasized over here. I would like to conclude by saying that for DevSecOps to be successful, it needs to be internalized, and that entails security assurance and governance through automated configuration systems and the collection of reliable metrics to measure governance and performance. Good governance is the key to ensuring robust DevSecOps deployment. I've shared the implementation of some of critical cybersecurity controls in the DevOps environment. You can read more literature in this area through the above references. If you are an ISACA member, the first two references are available to you. All these references I find helpful for further reading and understanding. I would like to end with a brief introduction to ISACA. ISACA is a leading global provider of knowledge, certifications, community advocacy, and education on information systems assurance and security, enterprise governance, and management of IT-related risks and compliance, with more than 145,000 members across 201 chapters in 188 countries. In Singapore, we have more than 2,500 members. ISACA Singapore runs an annual GTEx International Conference, and the upcoming one is going to be held virtually on 28th of August 2020, and it will be graced by Mr. Gaurav Kirti, the Assistant Chief Executive of the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore. We have a whole slew of renowned speakers. The detailed program is displayed here. We have 4 key tracks on governance and risk, compliance and audit, design and architecture, as well as security planning and program. Further details can also be found on our website. Attendees either pay a nominal member rate of Singapore $28 or non-member rate of Singapore $48. Do consider joining us if you are available. I shall now end with this slide. It is my belief that we are only as strong as our ecosystem. Therefore, the only way to keep up with rising threats is to keep finding weaknesses in our own ideas. And the reason it is important to connect with one another. I would love to hear from you, whether you agree, and especially if you disagree and why. You may know something that I don't. So I look forward to connecting and cross-sharing ideas and learning from one another. Not least, stay safe and stay secure. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. I may not have all the answers, but I will share with you my perspective and thoughts. If anyone else have other thoughts, feel free to chip in, whether you agree or disagree. Thank you.